Thank you. There are many benefits to becoming happier beyond the fact that it feels good to feel good. First, it leads to higher creativity, counter to popular belief that depression, feeling sad, feeling down actually contributes to our creativity. That's not the case. We're much more likely to think outside the box as we increase our levels of positive emotions. Second, increased engagement and motivation, whether it's at work, whether it's with other people, whether it's at home. Higher levels of motivation, higher levels of engagement as we increase positive emotions. Our relationships improve significantly, whether it's our romantic relationships, whether it's our friendships, whether it's our parenting. Improves a lot when we improve our levels of well-being even by a little bit. If we improve our levels of well-being, we experience more success. You see, it works the opposite of what most people think. Most people think that success will lead us to happiness, that getting this promotion at work or getting this raise will lead to more happiness. It doesn't. Certainly not in the long term. But what does increase success levels is increasing levels of happiness, positive emotions. And finally, interestingly, positive emotions, optimism, actually increases longevity. It strengthens our physical immune system. And I want to share with you one of the classical studies in the field of positive psychology that connects between positive emotions and physical health and longevity. This has become known as the Nun Study. It's 1932. 178 nuns just graduate from school, from the seminary. They're about to embark on their life's mission, to go off to different places around the United States. And researchers get a hold of these 178 nuns and ask them to write biographical sketches about themselves. One-pagers about where they were, what they're doing, where they hope to go. And then they go off. And essentially they lose touch with the researchers for the next few decades. But the researchers want to understand, what are the determinants of longevity? What can predict how long these nuns would live? And they looked in different areas. They looked at how devout these nuns were, how religious they were. Now, naturally, they were all very religious, but there were still differences among them. Could that determine how long they lived? Well, it turns out that it didn't predict longevity at all. Was it maybe their intelligence, IQ levels, how smart they were? Well, it turns out that it didn't predict longevity at all. Maybe it was where they chose to live, because some places, more pollution, less pollution, urban, rural areas, did that make a difference? Zero difference. Didn't predict at all how long they lived. They found one variable and one variable alone that predicted longevity. And that was positive feelings. That's it. Nothing else. Now, you ask, how did they measure positive feelings back in 1932? How did they measure it that it was able to predict how long they lived to a great extent? So this is what they did. They took these biographical sketches and they gave them, without the names, without knowledge of whose it was, they gave it to independent judges who read them and had the task of dividing them into 4 buckets, according to how positive they were. Bucket number 1 was very positive, bucket number 4 was least positive, and the 2 in between. And it turns out that this could predict how long they lived. Let me show you an example of 2 of the nuns, their biographical sketches. One example of a very positive nun, and one who was put in the least positive quartile. So the first nun is Celia O'Payne. God started my life off well by bestowing upon me grace of inestimable value. The past year which I spent as a candidate studying at Notre Dame has been a very happy one. Now I look forward with eager joy to receiving the holy habit of Our Lady and to a life of union with love divine. Where would you put her? Yeah, positive. You know, I'll have what she's having. It's great. Very positive, very cheerful. Number 1 bucket. Let me show you an example of the least cheerful bucket. This is Marguerite Donnelly. I was born on September 26, 1909, the eldest of 7 children, 5 girls and 2 boys. My candidate year was spent in the mother house, teaching chemistry and second-year Latin at Notre Dame Institute. With God's grace, I intend to do my best for our order, for the spread of religion, and for my personal sanctification. Now, not particularly negative, but, she's no Celio Payne. So she was in the least positive quartile. Now look at the results. At the age of 85, 90% of the most cheerful quartile were still alive, whereas only 34% of the least cheerful quartile were alive. Incredible difference. Listen to this. Age of 94, 54%, over a half of the most cheerful quartile were alive, whereas only 11%, just over 10% of the least cheerful quartile were alive. These are remarkable differences, all being predicted by positivity. There's more research showing that increasing levels of optimism can increase our lifespan by 8 to 9 years. This is serious stuff. Now, it's not just that we live better because we're more cheerful, we also live longer. It affects quantity and quality of life. But I must say, I don't know if anyone here is feeling a little bit of dis-ease. When I first saw this study, I felt a lot of dis-ease. Why? Because I wasn't born Celio Payne. I don't naturally gravitate toward optimism and cheerfulness. Actually, I gravitate to more anxiety and pessimism. This is why I got into this field. So when I saw this, I said, oh no, I'm going to die. This is it for me. It's all over. What am I going to do? So I was more distressed than happy about this research. But then when I dug deeper, further, I realized that the issue lies here. The issue is not about becoming Celio Payne. It's not about becoming happy all the time. It's simply about increasing our levels of optimism, becoming more cheerful, becoming more positive by a little bit. And it's those small changes that can make a big difference in our lives, both in terms of quality as well as quantity. Small changes make a big difference, and we know through the science of happiness how to make those small incremental changes, day in and day out, based on the choices that we make. And I want to give you a few examples, all based on research, showing how we can make a difference in our lives, how we can become more positive, even if our natural inclination, if our genes or our circumstances have led us to another place. So let me begin with probably the best known, most famous study in the field of positive psychology, and that is about counting our blessings, by Robert Emmons and Mike McAuliffe. What they did was they asked people every night before going to sleep to write down at least 5 things for which they're grateful, big things or little things. People who did that on a regular basis, on a daily basis, were happier as a result, more optimistic, more likely to achieve their goals, more generous, kinder toward other people, and physically healthier. In other words, it strengthened their immune system. It made them more cheerful, it made them healthier. How long does it take? 3 minutes a night? The key here is to do it with intention, to focus on it, to mean what you write or what you imagine. Sonia Lubomirsky has taken this research and shown that even doing it once a week impacts our overall levels of well-being. Doing it as a family can go a long way. We do it as a family. Our kids say what was fun for them during the week. We say what we're grateful for. And it's a wonderful way to start a meal. And if you're thinking of introducing that into your family and you have teenagers, you may be a little bit concerned right now. But I want you to keep something very important in mind. Teenagers are human beings too. And what you're doing as a parent, or as a teacher for that matter, you're planting the seed. And the seed will grow, will germinate if it can, if it needs to. Just plant the seed, just do it. It can go a long way in creating positive atmosphere, not to mention leading to more happiness, success, generosity, and physical health. Another study, this one conducted by Marty Seligman, considered the father of positive psychology. Marty Seligman introduced this exercise in his class initially. And after he saw the impact, also ran studies on it. What he asked his students to do was to write a gratitude letter. But a gratitude letter with a lot of meaning behind it, with a lot of thought behind it. To someone you're grateful for, someone who made a difference in your life. It could be your mother who you're grateful for. It could be a teacher you had. It could be your boss. It could be your partner or friend. And when you write this letter, to really focus on all the good things that happened. To really focus on the way in which this person made your life better. And after you write this letter, to go to this person and to read it to them. In his 40 years of teaching, Marty Seligman said he hasn't seen an impact on students like that project, like this assignment had. And he ran research on it, and what the research showed was that it's the single most powerful intervention out there in terms of raising levels of happiness. That can last for a week or 2 weeks, which just goes to the point that we should do it more often. Write these gratitude letters that we really mean to people we really care about. It was also shown that writing this letter and not reading it, in fact, writing it for a person who's no longer alive, goes a long way in contributing to our levels of happiness. When I teach, every year when I teach, I do this exercise. It's one of the highlights, if not the highlight of the semester. Let me share with you a couple of examples. So this is John. John walked into every class and he was there by himself. And he would walk and he would sit all the way in the back. But I would see him there because John was huge. He was on the Harvard American football team. And he was a big guy, but he would always come by himself and sit by himself at the back. And then a week after, I gave this assignment of writing a gratitude letter. At the end of the class, he got up and instead of walking out, he walked towards the stage. At that moment, I was debating whether I should run away or stay. I decided to stay. John walked up the stage and looked at me, and I looked at him. And he said, "Professor Ben-Shahar, can I come to your office hours, please?" And I said, "Sure, that's what office hours are for. Come along." The next day he came to my office hours. This huge, gentle giant. He comes in and he sits down. And I can see that he's nervous. And he looks at me and says, "Professor, this is the first time in my 3 years at Harvard that I've ever gone to office hours. But I came here because I wanted to tell you about the gratitude letter exercise from last week. I wrote a letter to my father. And I was home this weekend, and I read the letter to my father. And then he looked down. And when he looked up, I could see that his eye was a little bit moist. And he said that after I read the letter to my father, he got up and he hugged me for the first time since I was 8 years old. He said thank you. He got up and walked out. One letter. And then there was Debbie, who wrote her letter to her elementary school basketball coach. And she read a letter to the coach, and the coach had long retired. And she said that after she read the letter, the coach seemed 10 years younger. What a difference that letter can make. It can make a big difference to us writing it. It can make a big difference to the person receiving it. It can make a big difference to the relationship. It doesn't take that long. This idea of focusing on the positive also relates to work. Teresa Amabile, Harvard Business School professor, has shown that employees in the workplace that focus on the progress that they made during the day. And the progress can be something big or something small. It can be, I got a new client today, or I wrote a report, or I had a good productive meeting with a colleague. But employees who focus on their progress at least once a day, at the end of the day, Job satisfaction goes up, they're happier at work. Creativity goes up as well as productivity. They're better simply because they focus on the things that are going well, rather than taking it for granted. It's not just about looking at past things that happened at work, or things that we're grateful for that happened at home, or someone who contributed to our life in the past. This also applies to focusing on the future. My colleague, Dr. Dina Neer, ran the following study. When she asked one group to write 3 things that lie ahead, that was one group, and the second group had to write about 3 good things that lie ahead. In other words, 3 good things that I'm looking forward to tomorrow. And the group that wrote about 3 good things awaiting them, this group was less pessimistic. This group experienced less physical exhaustion. In other words, they had more energy. And finally, this group had less negative emotions. Just because they wrote about 3 things that they're looking forward to tomorrow. Now, how long does that take? A minute? And what a difference that makes. And finally, focusing on positive in relationships. Research by one of the leading researchers in the area of relationships, John Gottman, shows that one of the best determinants of success in a relationship is what the partners focus on. Partners that focus more on the positive, whether it's on their focusing on the positive in their first date that happened 20 years ago, or focusing on the positive of what happened yesterday. Partners that focus more on the positive are much more likely to stay together, and to stay together happily. It can make a big difference if we focus on the positive. Recently, a friend of mine who's familiar with the research in the science of happiness and with Gottman's research was going through a very negative, bad patch with her husband. They were fighting constantly. They were going really through a bad period in their relationship. And then finally she had had enough. And she went to her partner one day and she said, look, from now on, every day I want to hear at least 3 good things about me. We can fight as much as you want, but I want to hear 3 good things about me, that's all. And he was reluctant to do it, but she left him no choice. And they started it. And after a month, the relationship was transformed. Not because they stopped fighting, but simply because they also, not only, but also focused on the things that are working, on the good things. One of the basic premises of appreciative inquiry, which is a field of study related to positive psychology, there is always something to appreciate. In every organization, in every person, in every relationship, in every situation, there is always something that we can appreciate. It's my favorite word in English, appreciate. It has 2 meanings. The first meaning of the word appreciate is to say thank you, and that's a nice thing to do. But there is a second meaning to the word appreciate, and that is to grow in value. And the 2 meanings of the word appreciate are connected. Why? Because when you appreciate the good appreciates. When you appreciate the good in your life, when you do not take it for granted, then you have more of it. It appreciates. Unfortunately, the opposite is also the case. When you do not appreciate the good, when you take it for granted, the good depreciates. Whether it's in our relationships, in our families, at work, in our life as a whole. The person who really understands the value of gratitude and appreciation is Oprah Winfrey, who led a very difficult life, certainly at the beginning. And here is the conclusion she personally comes to. What you focus on expands, and when you focus on the goodness in your life, you create more of it. Opportunities, relationships, even money flowed my way when I learned to be grateful, no matter what happened in my life. I'd like to end this lecture by sharing with you what I think is the most effective technique, method for raising your levels of happiness, optimism, positivity. And that is reading an article written by the consummate optimist, by a person who called optimism her religion, by Helen Keller. Helen Keller wrote an article which she called 3 Days to See. In the article, she wrote about what she would do if she was given the gift of sight and sound for 3 days. Who would she go and meet? What would she go and look at? what would she go and listen to? 3 days, that's all. And in that article, she tells the story of a friend who comes to visit her. And she lived in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Then she lived in the woods. And the person came to visit her and then went out for a walk in the woods and came back after an hour. And Helen Keller asked her friend, so what was it like? What did you see? And her friend said, well, nothing of note. And Helen Keller writes about this experience. I wondered how it was possible to walk for an hour through the woods and see nothing of note. I, who cannot see, find hundreds of things. The delicate symmetry of a leaf, the smooth skin of a silver birch, the rough, shaggy bark of a pine. I, who am blind, can give one hint to those who see. Use your eyes as if tomorrow you will have been stricken blind. Hear the music of voices, the songs of a bird, the mighty strains of an orchestra, as if you would be stricken deaf tomorrow. Touch each object as if tomorrow your tactile sense would fail. Smell the perfume of flowers, taste with relish each morsel, as if tomorrow you could never taste or smell again. Make the most of every sense, glory in all the facets and pleasures and beauty which the world reveals to you. So here is the best way to increase your levels of happiness and optimism and positivity. Go on Google and look for 3 Days to See by Helen Keller. Print it out and put it on your fridge or office door or your wall. Read it and reread it, and every time you need a boost, turn to it. Because at every moment in our life we have a choice. We can take things for granted, or we can appreciate them. We can help them grow or ignore them and lose them. And if we increase our levels of positivity even by a little bit, we can improve our relationships significantly. We can improve our productivity and creativity significantly. We can lead a better, happier life. We can thrive and flourish and fulfill more of our potential. And as we know from the Nun Study, we will be around longer to enjoy our increased positivity. Thank you.